Three different ones. Three different.
So, Robin Black.
Yeah, I guess
welcome to the fucking podcast.
Thanks, man.
This is amazing.
It's good hanging. Yeah,
I've been following you for a long time since your rock days.
So it's good how Toronto Boy does.
Yeah.
Good.
It's going pretty good. I mean, you know, what I do is look at fighting all day, which is a pretty good gig. You know, basically watch people fight and then try to analyze what's actually happening in there. And over the last year or two, I've tried to figure out how that applies to other things in life. Like how studying martial arts can teach me me or other people, some valuable thing about life. And that's what I do every day. And that I can't, like I literally am sitting here telling you guys that and going, I can't fucking believe that's my job. That's ridiculous.
So I kind of wanted to, how we do our podcast is kind of like this. We're sitting at actually a kitchen table just talking shit. And the concept really originally was, when you're at a house party, the best place to hang out is in the kitchen because that's where shit goes down. Let's get a chance to get everybody to know actually Robin Black, because we were talking earlier. I've seen you around for years. Yep. How did you end up in Toronto? Because you're not from Toronto, and the story really, like, this gives us a chance to tell your story.
Well, when I was in Winnipeg, and as a kid, I was always a performer somehow. Martial arts was my main interest, you know. I was an odd kid who liked a couple of things, but my parents, when I was very young, I lived in a little town called Pinawa, which is like a nuclear research plant in the middle. For real, it was Atomic Energy of Canada.
Like Simpsons.
Yeah, very much like it. But the difference is, what doesn't make sense about the Simpsons, I mean, everything makes sense about the Simpsons except for this one thing, is that where are all the fucking scientists, right? Like, my town was full. There were let's say 1,400 adults, and 1,350 of them were PhDs and master's degrees in like chemistry and physics and stuff like that. In the Simpsons, they're all adults, right? Like, I don't know where the actual scientists are, because in a town like that, it's just scientists. So it's a weird place to grow up.
But you do know that was a cartoon, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels cartoony, but...
So you've been around intellect your whole life, then?
Yeah, kind of. Like, my father was doing a PhD in education. So he ran the education, and the reason he took that job, I was going into grade 6, was because it was so, like, such a tough assignment to teach the kids of brilliant people. Right?
Actually, it would be a pretty crazy challenge. It's like 7 musical prodigies. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a different level.
Yeah, so all of these kids were the kids of, you know, and what was cool for me as a kid, like, we had, you know, kids from the Middle East and from Asia and stuff, so that was really normal to me. And it's the only small town in Manitoba where you were surrounded by people from all over the world, you know, because normally it's just you and other hicks, you know, and I mean that in
surrounded by genius. And they're offspring of genius.
Yeah.
And your dad took the challenge to go there to teach. Did you ever feel out of place?
Yeah, it was weird because I was definitely an artist. Like, I was definitely an artist from the time that I was a kid. I liked martial arts. I liked music. I liked fashion to some degree. I liked art, you know. And I did extremely well in science and physics and math. I would be at the top.
Most artists actually are genius just in a different way, right?
Makes sense now.
Yeah.
Your mind works.
Yeah, I was very, you know, did really well in school until about grade 12, where I just didn't care anymore. Like, I wasn't being challenged at all. And so I went from the top 1 or 2 in my class in grade 9, 10, 11. And by grade 12, I really didn't give a fuck.
So were you still doing martial arts at that age?
Yeah.
Now, were you chasing women, perhaps?
Yeah. So from very young, my parents could see that the one thing I just kept insisting on was that I wanted to take karate or taekwondo or something. And so eventually they would, and it's the big sacrifice, like my whole life really, and if I'm a parent one day, I will absolutely remember this. The fact that they would take me to Winnipeg, which was an hour and a half each way, 3 times a week. And my dad was the superintendent of the school division. My mother was the public health nurse of a town nearby. So she'd drive home 30 minutes, pick me up, then drive me an hour and a half, and then wait 90 minutes to 2 hours for me, and then drive an hour and a half back. And they did that 3 times a week for much of my, you know, grade 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I was competing in Taekwondo first in Winnipeg and then kind of in North America. But by grade 12, I was like, I grew my hair long and I played in a rock band and I liked taking mushrooms and I liked chasing girls. Yes, and so both my ability to compete at a high level and do school started to take a back seat to exploring, which even that in retrospect, like I think that's a really important thing. Figure out how to get laid, figure out how to make friends, figure out how to work your way through an argument with people who don't like you. I think that's all valuable too. But so by grade 12, I didn't really care as much. But it was a weird and different place to grow up, and I didn't realize it. You never. The last thing the fish discover is the water, right? Like I didn't know I didn't know I was in a weird place around different adults and different kids in a different environment. I just kind of was doing what was around me.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty crazy, actually, because growing up in a small town and ending up on a world stage, it's just it's a common story.
Yeah.
Were you an only child as well?
No, 2 brothers. I'm the middle. So
wow, so your parents were driving you all over the place.
Yeah.
And your brothers doing the same?
Well, no, they didn't have that one obsessive interest. So one of my parents would take me Monday, Wednesday, Friday. For a big chunk of it, like a couple year period, it was mostly my mother. And then my brothers would be at home with my father or whichever one was at home, and they didn't have that kind of real obsessive interest like I had. So they kind of made that sacrifice to do that.
So were you taking music lessons as well? Because
no, I never.
So
honestly,
how do you go from Winnipeg?
Yeah.
I don't even remember the name of the town.
Yeah, Pinawa was the little town. Yeah.
Pinawa.
Yeah.
Pinawa?
Toronto, Ontario.
Yeah, Winnipeg is the stop in between, right? And I never. Not only did I not study music, I've never studied music. I'm not a musician, and I don't know how to sing. The fact that if you're asking me that,
if people don't know, there's a reason why we're talking about this.
I'm sorry if you hear jingling. That's my iced coffee in a tin. It's the reason you're asking me is because I made 2 records with big international music producers that were released on EMI Records, and we toured the world with me singing in a rock band. But I literally couldn't sing, and even as later, I just kind of found a place within the connection between my lungs and my throat, and that kind of could pull it off well enough. In the studio, I would work with high-level people and kind of learn the technique. Live, I kind of found a place that I could place my voice and still, I would not strive to have a better voice. I would strive to camouflage it with higher kicks and tighter pants and better lingo in between. And I was finding ways to camouflage the weakness, which was my inability to sing or do music, with all these other things, which was a valuable learning lesson. But in retrospect, it's exactly the opposite of my philosophy now.
So kind of the whole being an intellect and growing up around it carried over to a point where it almost sounds like you overthought things.
I think...
Or, some would argue we're prepared as well.
Yeah, I think... And when it comes to the way that I approached the band, the flaw in it was... And this flaw, I very much learned and see the world differently now. I just was embedded with George St. Pierre for a few months, and this reinforced... My take on it was... How can I camouflage the weakness with all this other stuff? So I became an entertaining speaker, and I became a flashy stage performer, and had all these shticks and a lot of visuals and all that stuff. Now, very much I go and I find the weakness and attack it head on. And like
That's maturity, though, isn't it?
I think so, and I think
you
ultimately
got a few years under your belt of experience in quite a variety of ways as well, right?
Yeah,
challenges just keep coming.
I think when you go to shift something, so martial arts was always the thing that I was really the most obsessed with. Music was really fun to let you perform and be creative and get chicks and lots of other really good things. But really, martial arts was what I was into. And when I kind of made the decision, and it feels like I made it in one day, that it's like actually what I want to do is commentate fighting. And pretty quickly I realized the route to do that is fight. And then by fighting, I'll be at least able to, if I get kicked in the head and knocked unconscious, at least I went and approached it that way, which would maybe open the door and let me stick my toe in it, because right now I'm a guy who wears eye makeup and tight pants who wants to commentate fights, and that doesn't make any fucking sense. But also in the process of fighting...
Sure it does, though.
I mean,
apparently it does make sense,
yeah,
actually.
But by fighting, I would learn the truth of it. And that's what I really wanted to figure out. And it would also force me to do exactly the opposite of what I did. If you're weak, you have to work on that. You have to embrace it. You have to go head on to it. You can become a singer in a rock band and not know how to sing, but you can't become a fighter in a cage and not know how to fight. That's not gonna fly.
You gotta walk the talk at one point.
You have to do it.
So when you went from your hometown, you went to where? Did you
Winnipeg.
end up- to Winnipeg, and then you went from Pegger to Toronto?
So from Pinawa...
I'm just trying to paint your trail.
So a small town Manitoba, or a small town Saskatchewan, or a small town New Brunswick, you're going to move to the big city of your town. That's going to be step one for most people. Yeah. And so I moved to Winnipeg, and I had a strategy pretty early. So I thought, okay, well, whether I'm going to be a singer or a performer or do something like that, I need a job. But I also need a job that'll let me be myself. So I went to...
How old were you at this time?
I was 7, just before my 18th birthday when I moved to Winnipeg.
A thinker.
Yeah.
Thinker.
Yeah, and I had a strategy. There was
When I was 18,
question.
I was thinking about...
Pussy.
Yes.
Yes. And I had a strategy for getting pussy,
how to roll
too.
up hash different than I did last night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it starts with a strategy for getting pussy, which is I'm going to sing in a rock band, which means I have to have my hair long, and I really want to get some tattoos, but I still need to pay my bills. So I went to hairdressing school.
Yeah.
So it was like, it made sense. I could be an artist. I could be myself. I could dress and act the way that I wanted. I'd probably learn some neat shit, and I'd be surrounded by women all the time.
Sounds like sounds like you had already had it figured out.
Yeah. It was a good plan. Like this, in retrospect, there's no
smile is so big.
If anybody fucked with you, you get
and the best thing is,
exactly.
with age, you can look back and use the word gratitude.
Big time.
So that's why that smile is actually so big, because you actually fully appreciate it.
Yeah, I do. I really do. I mean, I see. Yeah, I mean, you guys know. You just said it. When you were 17, 18, you thought this way, and now you think another way. But so I can look back and go, man, I made a good choice going to hairdressing school. And wow, I made a really good choice there to move to that place. But the truth is, if you were
You could have been
comfortable, you could have.
A girl gone the other way to her.
Easy.
Yeah.
But if you're living it, if you're doing it your way, every choice is going to be the right choice. Yeah. It really is. Like so, instead I get distracted by some girl and I knock her up and I have a kid and the kid's the greatest thing in my life. Yeah. Hey man, good thing I met that girl. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like wherever it goes, as long as you're making honest choices and you're doing you properly for you, they're probably all going to look back and be the right choice.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what you get with wisdom, I guess. That's the wisdom of that gray hair that you have.
But you also have to have no fear in that aspect too. Because a lot of people have fear.
Not the t-shirt.
If you go back, no fear. But if you go back to it, as shameless plug. Do they exist though?
I don't know.
Yeah. Let's get him to give us some shirts.
We should. You know what? We should regenerate that in grubware.
Yes.
Chip
and pepper too.
No.
Varney.
They already did the
Chip and Peppers from Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Those guys did the most coke. More than anybody.
More than you?
Yes. When they got together with Kelsey Grammer, somehow those two and Kelsey Grammer were doing the
Winnipeg.
most coke. Yeah.
And
then Kelsey Grammer invested money in their company. And I don't think I'm saying anything that's litigious. I think this is all fairly well documented stuff. Kelsey Grammer went through his cocaine years and then met these two crazy long blonde-haired surfer dudes from Winnipeg in California.
Which is ironic in its own way.
Yeah, exactly. They're from Winnipeg. Yeah, I cut one of their hair for a bit, Pepper. And he was like...
So you sure it wasn't Chip?
Yeah, pretty sure it was Pepper. I don't think anybody on planet Earth did more cocaine than those two and Kelsey Grammer in about a 5-year period.
How old were you, think that?
I think I was...
How
old were they? So when I cut Pepper's hair, I was probably 20 and he was probably 25 to 28.
Oh, really?
So he would be... I'm 48 now, so he'd be 53 to 55. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So those guys killed it then when they were
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, when they were
That's a great
kids.
business acumen.
Yeah.
And Chip and
Yeah.
Pepper was fire.
Fearless,
Yeah.
right? Like so
Yeah.
so people listening may not, you can quickly Google Chip and Pepper and you'll just see some really bad tie-dyed shirts. But somehow,
Which are
yeah.
super
yeah,
cool, right?
Yeah, they are.
should
They will
Yeah.
come back. They're
Yeah.
gonna come back for
Yeah.
sure.
With fire.
But
Yeah.
5 fire emojis.
it's a weird thing, right? Like when these, I never thought of this till you're saying it now, but you see these kind of, being a startup is a big thing now. Like everybody wants to like start something, come up with an idea, put a bunch of people in a room.
And talk about how they're starting it up.
Exactly, and then bring in somebody who has money, because other people are like, well, I have money, I'm going to invest in young, fiery people, like, which would have been Chip and Pepper, right? So
Yeah.
we're literally talking about these two guys who not only pioneered fashion, but they pioneered finding rich people to go, I believe in these guys, and put money into it. Like they were so far
Well, it's
ahead.
amazing some of the shit you talk over a pile of Coke, right? And apparently
True.
these guys just kept it coming until they got the paper signed.
True, very,
They were
very
smart
true.
enough to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've seen
They're in
that.
for the long haul.
Yeah.
Day 3, still hasn't signed the contract.
Yeah, right.
Go
Yeah.
again.
Let's get some
Last week-
hookers. Yeah, like, yeah.
What do you need
guys
to
had
do
a
next?
plan.
Yeah, exactly,
We'll
exactly.
sleep with our dad.
Yeah.
24.
Yeah, man. I have seen that too. Like now, again, I never. Don't you still think you're the young guy in the room? Like, don't you still think you're the 23-year-old
Always.
new kind of hotshot with the great ideas?
Always.
Yeah, me too.
Always.
The whole thing is when there's not
crazy.
a mirror around, it works.
Yeah.
Yes, well, true.
When your
true.
back aches and you're getting out of bed.
Yeah, right.
Cramp won't go away.
But
It's that energy, though. It doesn't matter.
No.
As long as that's there.
yeah, but when we're having a conversation like this, where you realize that you do have 25 or 28 years of seeing some of this stuff, you have that young like fire to go do things, but you also now have experience. So the next time you go, and now I'm in my 30s and I'm watching, whether it's a business that work for or contribute television for or whatever, and you see the owner is now doing coke with that one guy in the office who is staying up with him all night and he's talking shit in his ear. It's like, oh man, you need to fire this department and instead we should. And you watch that shit happen again, right? I've worked for a number of different television companies over the last decade, and there was one of them in particular where there was this young, fast talker who, in the course of 6 months of coked up weekends with the owner, ended
White
up,
lies. That's what we call white lies.
right, ended up getting him to get rid of the entire arm of his TV station that had got them through to where they were, and implement all this guy's ideas, which toileted all the, that shit like that happens at a high level all the time, all the time. Yeah,
Maybe that's what they meant by cocaine ruins your lives.
of course that's what they meant.
Is there bubbles in
Yeah.
the mouth?
Yeah.
I thought it was you die.
Yeah.
But apparently
That-
that's ruin your business.
Yeah. No, if you look around, and it's shocking too that when you do a podcast like this, or a lot of I get to contribute cool work for like TSN, which is the anchor real television network in Canada, or I'm going to Russia to do some work next week.
You work for the Russians?
Yeah,
Are you sure you
I
work
have
for the Russians?
done some work for Russians before. It's actually very you do your research. You do your research really, really quickly,
Yeah.
and you find out are these guys known for being straight, or are these guys known for being not straight? If they're known for being straight, everything they will tell you will be so. Right, but you have to research before you go to work with a
shit
company.
talker, not shit
yeah,
talker.
exactly. And so this one company that I worked with, they are from Chechnya, and the guy who owns it is one of the wealthiest oligarchs in Chechnya, and his reputation is what he tells you happens 100% of the time. And then you go and you research this guy's name is Hasiev. Yeah, but
Making up.
yeah,
Look at his hair, he's
yeah,
just making up names.
yeah.
No, the guy that owns Chelsea.
Yeah.
Football.
No, this guy does invest in a lot of sports. But so then you research you start making because they're researching you too, right? That's how you should do business internationally.
100%.
And you
It's
check
called
out
due
10
diligence.
fighters, exactly. And they're like, I got paid right after, and it went like this. Everything they ever promised me was true. And that's the thing with Russia, is you don't have to look very far to find out, oh, this is the above the board, this is the straight shooters. Cool, we can work with them. Or I heard some weird shit and somebody went missing. We won't work for them, right? Right. But a lot of these now come from the work that I do myself, my YouTube channel and social media related stuff. And controlling that, you realize is it feels, some people might think it's unstable, you know, well, you don't have a job or whatever. But once you realize that these big businesses, but some of these big businesses are unstable because all it takes is one coked up guy on the weekend to talk, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or one guy to get sick.
Full circle.
Well, that's what I was thinking about as I went to talk about freelance. It's like people, now say, for example, TSN. That's stable. That's as stable a television job as exists.
Pretty vanilla existence there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is run by high up executive types that have proven for decades and decades, and the reason that they're successful is they don't make any giant crazy moves. So that's super stable. But any of these other companies, whether it's TV or web or whatever, your job is never really stable because all it takes is one coked up guy in the office to get the boss on it, or one girl to convince somebody that she should move to Germany, that he should move to Germany with her. Like people see their jobs as this really stable thing, and it's really not.
It's scary.
You gotta build your own foundations.
You do for sure.
So you're in Winnipeg. You're cutting hairs at public heads.
Yes.
No, that's a pretty awesome relationship. I didn't know.
Yeah, those guys were cool.
And you were in a band at the time. You're starting a band.
Yeah. So
it's easy to forget about our past because we're always looking forward, but at the same time, it helped get us where we are, right?
For sure.
And that's a very interesting aspect to where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
So it's the neighborhood you're living in.
Yeah.
Here, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're all on the same train that way.
For sure.
That's good to know.
Well, so I'm like 20, and I'm working in a hair salon by this point, and definitely starting a band is the short and middle term plan for me, because it's fun. I'm also, and I think we all are also influenced by sort of what feels exciting at the time. And when I look, I can't imagine that the 18-year-olds right now are going, man, rock music. You know what I mean? They might be looking at tech. They might be looking at being a startup. They might be looking at podcasting or, being a YouTuber or an blogger, quote, influencer. Yeah. But kids right now are not looking going, man, I want to be in a rock band. But 1988, 1989 in Winnipeg, man, it just felt like where the urgency was, the creativity was, the hot girls were. You'd be surrounded by action and fun and risk-taking behavior and reckless choices. And, it was so, when you look at it in the time context, it was so appealing. And I liked being a performer, and I liked creativity, and I liked learning things. So being forced to learn how to make it work when you... and even the guys I played with, from that band in Winnipeg, which was called Ballroom Zombies, right through to when I moved to Toronto 7 years later, they always recognize, like, Robin can't really sing, but man, that guy's driven. And man, he makes things happen. And wow, he puts on a show, and he gets the audience into it, and people want to write about him. And like they recognized,
it gets people out, which is a big thing when you're a young band, getting the crowd out.
Yeah, big time. And so they always recognize that, and we're like, we can make it work. But again, in retrospect, it's like, I should have attacked that head on, because at 20, so by 25, and people do this all the time. This is relevant to everybody. So I'm 20 years old, and I'm like, fuck, it'd be great if I played guitar. That would really help. But man, if only I'd have started playing guitar when I was 14, I'd be a really good guitar player. Because when you're 20, you think kind of that's it. Life is there. Then 25 takes you like what feels like 18 months to get to, and all of a sudden you think to yourself, man, fuck, I should be playing guitar. Damn it, if I'd have just started at 20 when I thought about that last time, I'd be a killer guitar player by now, right? Those are the lessons I learned from that era, is to attack whatever you're weak at head on. Deal with it every day. It's not that, because the fear, you mentioned fear, the fear that people have is that they might fail at it. Or that it's scary, or what if I suck, but those things aren't real. Like that exists only in your head. In reality, when you apply effort to anything, you get better at it. That is true of everything you do.
When your friend tries something and kind of fails, you don't look at what a loser or anything. You go, oh fuck, good try, bud. You help them back up as a friend.
Yeah.
And when they're ready, they go back at it.
Yeah, it's true. Your dog is sitting there with a ball staring at me.
Yeah, her Peaches.
Yeah, she's so cute.
She pretty much runs.
Can she jump up on me?
She can.
Will she be into that?
wanna get on the
Hi.
mic?
You want to get on the mic?
Hey, Peachy.
Oh, she's so adorable. She's
It's their
sniffing.
second podcast. I
Yeah,
believe.
sweet. Well, she's pretty good. You're right, though. Like, nobody. So, Eddie Alvarez fought Conor McGregor. And Eddie Alvarez is one of the greatest game day performers ever, right? That guy shows up and he overperforms. He's better in the moment than he is, in the training room or in anything else. That's where he was meant to be. And he gets shit kicked and embarrassed and knocked out in front of Madison Square Gardens in the biggest fight of his life, in front of the biggest audience that will ever watch him. And he said he went home, and the next day his wife loved him, and his kids thought he was the greatest, and his friends gave him a hug, and everybody, the world didn't end. Nothing bad happened to him.
Yeah.
Like, he went in, and he had the experience, and whatever went down, he had no change in his life. And he talks about it very openly. And you just, like, for your friends that you know that are over planning and never doing, or not doing things because they think things apply to other people. If only they could experience what he experienced and still go, actually, fuck, this is really empowering. It's freeing. I'm like, I can do
it
anything.
is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Failure is
Been
the
there,
greatest
been there.
fucking thing.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing. You hate it, makes you cry. You've never felt as bad as you do when you fail. And then a year later, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to you.
They say complacency should be your best friend. And what they mean by that is when you look at it, you analyze what's going on, you're sticking around and staying in the same spot. By analyzing and saying, are we in a good spot or are we not in a good spot? Are we just circling around this whole thing, or are we going to fucking move on and do bigger things with our lives and not be complacent and not just stick to one thing and not just be happy of where we're at? Because I don't know about everybody. I'm sure you're the same way, that you're not ever going to be happy to the day that you
All
die.
the better things that happen in your life are the ones that you kind of take a risk on anyways. Right?
Big time.
Unless you're given the grand key to everything.
Yeah, but I don't
very
think
many people
almost anyone ever really is. In fact, I think in most cases when people see it, like one day, commentating the UFC is something I've wanted to do for 10 years. Specifically, every choice I've made has been with that as partially in mind. And the day that it'll happen, there will be the people who look at it and think that was easy or it was given. I've had people say to me, yeah, I didn't really, I'm not a fan of yours because you were the guy chosen to represent MMA. I wasn't fucking chosen. I chose myself. I was a guy wearing eye makeup and tight pants that everybody fucking hated that wanted to work in the fight business. Nobody has ever got,
because you're not supposed to be.
I'm not supposed to be. Almost
you know what I mean?
nobody, very few human beings have gotten the amount of hate while entering a business as I got being a guy in a glam rock band saying that I wanted to work in the fight business.
Is this in Canada or the States?
Everywhere. Because the fighting is so...
Strombolopoulos kind of the same way.
Yeah.
With
Who?
the hockey.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Who?
Strombolopoulos?
You said his name totally
Yeah.
different. Exactly
Yeah.
what you hear.
Yeah,
What did I say?
George
Hey, I like how you
Sambalopoulos.
took
Yeah.
that risk.
Yeah.
So when
Put
you
it out there.
Strombo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strombo.
So when you
Yeah.
came
You know what I'm
from
saying.
Winnipeg
Yeah.
to Toronto, you took
Yeah.
a risk.
Yes.
Keeping the theme.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a deal already, record
No.
wise, or
No.
did you go there looking?
Yeah,
for
I
it?
had no band.
Okay,
I had
so
no
you came
band.
over here.
I came here. I had
over here
one
like so
friend.
far.
I had. It is far in 1997.
So you're 28, right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, 1997. I would have been 28. So maybe 96, maybe 97, right around that time.
So your balls are big enough.
Yes,
Right?
and I had a girl that I had met, so that was gonna, and I could stay with her for some length of time, and
Yeah.
she was hot, and I really liked hanging out with her. She was a nice person.
shocker.
Yeah, so that helped. That was sort of the anchor that, personal life, happy spot. Now the risk is, I had a band, and now at the same time, as I was wanting to come here, the original plan was, guys, let's move to Toronto, right? And so I think when I was in the room, they all smiled and nodded. And when I was not in the room, they were like, yeah, exactly. So they never really came out and said that to me. But I was all over the place trying to focus. Now I would be quite focused. I would say, we can move there in this way. You guys can stay on the couch for this length of time. Let's find an apartment. How do we, you do this job, let's find you a job. And I would make it structured. Then I'm like, we're going to move to Toronto. We're going to sign a record deal. And we're going to be the biggest band in the world. To which I would be certain that was so. But these other three guys would be like, I think Robin's doing too much drugs. Right? And they wouldn't have been wrong about that either at the time.
But that got you here.
Yeah.
Right?
So
where's the Mecca in Toronto? We all know what the answer is here for if you're into fashion.
Yeah.
A hairstylist.
Yeah.
and in a glam rock
Yeah,
band.
Queen Street.
Where are you going to move to? Queen Street
Yeah.
West. And where are
Yeah.
you going to get a job?
Yeah. I worked at Coupe Bazaar, which was kind of the hair salon here.
In the
Yeah,
90s?
in the 90s. So I went to work there.
Space
yeah.
Age salon at the time.
Yeah, and then we started playing the horseshoe and the sorry, there wasn't a we. So I by this point had made a lot of contacts with people in the record business who had come out and seen my band before, and everybody in retrospect kind of had the same vibe. They're like, there's something about this fucking guy, but he's not really that good of a singer, and the whole picture isn't there. But I had kind of injected myself into being a character in the Canadian music scene, even though our band hadn't really broken out. But we were always chasing something. We would find the way to make an independent music video at a time that was very challenging, get it played on Much Music.
Blonde, right?
Yeah, exactly. So.
Thank you.
So then we moved here, and I started taking meetings with record companies looking for a record deal, even though I had no band.
Yep.
And so they all kind of looked at me like, well, where's the demo? It's like, well, we're working on it. So who's in your band? It's still being
Players.
like, yeah, exactly.
Players.
So again, now I would never bullshit like that. So that's another lesson I learned from that. Then I would decide, go do the hard work first, get it done, make it work, and then under promise and over deliver.
So is that because, hold on, there's a lot of people who say, especially in the industry we're all in one degree or another, fake it till you make it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's the other side of things where it's like exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So build a solid product and a brand or whatever, know it inside out and bring it with conviction.
Yes.
Both give you the same results, which is a strike at the match, right?
I think fake it till you make it doesn't work anymore because it's been done too much. I think when you
maybe it's for just what I was trying to get at as a younger you.
Yes, it's the
Right?
easier
You don't
one.
mind getting egg on your face because you know what's coming. But when you're older, you know that if it falls apart, it's egg on your face.
For me, at my age compared to then, I would not recommend fake it till you make it, but also time. In 1989, 93, fake it till you make it, that's how the society worked. Now, since 99 out of 100 are doing fake it till you make it and you see through it, be the 1 out of 100 who's actually good. That's the secret now. Yeah. And in those 25 or 30 years, the way the world has changed has shifted over to the point that it's like, since everybody claims they're good, just show me the truth.
So have some substance.
Yeah, it's going to be substance now. Quality's everything now. There's no question. Yeah. There's no, because in the field that I'm in now, analyzing fighting every day and talking about fighting on the internet and television and trying to tell the stories around it. Every couple of months, some jackass pops up and says that he's really good, or he's the guy who does it, or he's relevant. And he's gone in a couple of months because he's not going to put in the 40, 50 hours a week of work for 10 years to actually get good at what he does. He's not going to do that.
So you got your social media aspect.
Yep.
You got your Facebook.
Yep.
YouTube channel.
Yeah, YouTube.
Snapchat.
I haven't been doing Snapchat. Once Instagram.
Yeah. I'm just going through them all here.
Once Instagram started to do stories, my projection was that in 18 months Snapchat will be much smaller. Yeah. So therefore, don't spend the effort there. So
I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
Your stock went down as well.
Yeah.
That's another story.
Yeah, that's another story.
And then YouTube. Right?
Yes, YouTube.
So
and Periscope.
Yeah. So that's basically a handful of options, right?
Yeah.
This is like a new career that you're launching into, or you're established now. However, you need to utilize all those to keep going. When you have your band that it doesn't exist, and you're selling basically yourself, not a lot's changed. The only options really have is that back then you just had going out and talking shit with people, get to know everybody, flyering, postering, going to see other bands, talking shit and get in the circle and get to know people, figure it out. There was no internet. There was no all of those. Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube. There was none of that.
So the big thing that I could control different between then and now is then I wasn't really the quality wasn't that good, and now I can make sure that it is.
But you're in the same situation because you're really just pushing yourself.
True.
Your brand, and that's the quality.
But
right?
one, I'm better at this than I was at that, so that helps a great deal. But the other that lets you multiply it by 10. So I build a band where the guys are talented. There's quality songwriters involved in a couple of guys. That once I learn a little bit of poetry and crafting the things and working with them and storytelling, I have something I can now add. We make something not bad. I'm still the weak point at this point in that stage, but so it's good enough now that we can go and get the world to see it and share.
Put it out there.
So we would go and we would. One guy who really loved doing it, he would smoke pot and go out every night, and he would poster for weeks. Then every single night, we would take miniature posters. We would flyer in our hands, getting drunk in bars on Queen Street for at least 2 weekends before. Make it an event. Then we would rehearse in the rehearsal space 4 hours a night, 4 or 5 nights a week, then go out and flyer. It was this ongoing thing. And if we did our job really, really, really well, 350 people would come to the Horseshoe, and we would finally have that moment where 350 people were there where we could share our art or ideas. Now, if I turn this phone on right now, sitting here with you guys on Periscope, I can get 350 people to share our ideas. Yeah, you know what I mean? I sat down with Paulie Malignaggi, a boxing world champion, and I put this phone there. There were 1,100 people hanging out watching us. Yeah. We would drive 25 hours in a van with everybody farting to Winnipeg to set up for 3.5 hours and do 6 interviews by phone and 1 in person and flyers and posters and send all of that stuff to get 350 people. Now I turn this phone on and 1,100. Yeah. So I'm way better. And what I do is way of a higher quality than when you compare it to that. But the technology has but the difference is, no fucking buddy will come onto my Periscope if I don't have anything of quality. So now it's even more, the ability to do it is easier, but the necessity for quality is higher. Because those 1,100 people will go to somebody else if I suck.
But at the same time, you have to remember this. Before, when you're in a band, you had to wait to get the approval of these people after the show was done.
Right.
Now you know that these people are actually, they've sought you out.
Yeah.
Enough that they're going to stick around and watch it and then subscribe as well. So, you know what I mean? You are putting out something quality. That's more.
It has to be quality.
As well, though.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what? I got to get up and do this. I can't go out and get hungover for tomorrow because I've got this I got to do.
Yeah. The technology is the easy part. Like, I was working at a 24-hour fight channel that kind of cut our entire department. And within 2 days, I was up on YouTube and 14,000 people watched it. And within a month, all of these other platforms, we were making them work. Learning that only took a month. Getting good enough that anyone will actually pay attention takes you much of your lifetime. Yep. So Rogan, who's a friend of mine, a very big supporter, and is a great, amazing guy, has been super helpful. He will be viewed by 5 million people. He's a genius. Yeah, he's a genius. He's a fucking genius. 5 million people will watch him sit around and have this conversation. Okay. And then in my business, next after that would be another friend of mine, a really sweet guy, brilliant guy, driven, hardworking. Brendan Schaub will go up, and 80,000 people will watch him. Much smaller than Joe. And then next on that list will be me. There's 200 other people that they could choose from. 200, but they will choose Joe, 90% of them, and then of the remaining 10%.
Or if Joe's not available, I'll check out Shop, but at the same time,
I'm in that collection, and there are 200 others that aren't, and the difference between me and most of those 200 is quality. It's not that they don't know how to use fucking Periscope. They have the same phone that I'm holding right now. They have the only thing you can actually control. There's no hack. There's no hashtag. There's no finding a quick way to be better at substance is the only variable.
And consistency.
Yeah, and consistency. Those are the only variables you can control, but you can control them. And if you're honest, same thing what I talked about, that back then I would try to find a way to work around the weakness. Now you have to be self-analytical like crazy. Did people hate something? Why? What of that did I do wrong? Because if you look at it and go, oh, these guys don't fucking get it. Or, this is unfair, man. Like, I don't know why they're watching Schaub's. It's not good. Mine's better. If you start doing shit like that, you're going nowhere. You look back and you go, what can I control? I can So in my case, my stuff is, the goal is to just keep learning more.
Every day.
Never stop and go, so this is how we talk about fighting now? Okay, I'll just do that again tomorrow. Learn forever. That I can do more of. If I'm doing it and I haven't broken through enough, because my belief is, and what I think is a differentiating factor, or I believe it is that I'm going to go further. I'm going to research it harder. I'm going to study it deeper, and I'm going to find the complex aspects of fighting, and I'm going to try to find the language to make them people understand them in an easier way. That's what my mandate of what I do. So I just keep doing that more and more. And if something stalls for a little while, I'll just do more of that because I know that's what's going to work for me.
It's kind of like the old saying: if you're not moving forward, you're moving back. Mm-hmm. There's no standing still anymore.
That's interesting because think of why that's so. That's 100% so. Think of why that's so. Because the world is moving. Mm-hmm. So and it's moving all the time. So if you stop, it moves forward, which feels like you're moving back. Just imagine in a river. I think of change like a river all the time. And when I was exhausted and overwhelmed from the amount of work that it was taking to be chasing what I'm into, I went to a cottage with my wife, and we sat down. I sat in front of, and it was just a fluke. I found it on Airbnb, and I sat in front of that water, and I watched it move for at least 3 or 4 hours. And when you watch water move, take something floating in it, it's moving too. Just make it anchor for a second. Water just flows right by it. That's what everything is. Everything is changing constantly. And not everybody sees that.
The only thing constant in life is change.
Is change. And it is sometimes you get frustrated with this conversation because it is so obviously true of everything. But we live in a society, something about the way that we're domesticated and trained, we think that this is the same. Like people...
You rely on it.
Yeah. Like you think that it's...
We were talking actually about this earlier at the time before you showed up.
Like everything is... I mean, I'm looking around your apartment and I look at the stove and it's like there are new stoves that work so much better than that stove. That doesn't mean this one isn't valid. My stove's old, but it's changed. A stove isn't that thing. A stove is some way new thing now. Yeah. Everything is like that. Everything. And what's
the same way kind of with music, right? So with the kind of music you were making back in the day, would you guys end up getting a contract? We never got to that.
We
not to rear you back in, but it's relevant to.
Well, again, I wasn't 100% as sort of defined in my thinking as I am now. So I'm looking at this sort of through retrospect glasses, but we were trying to find the things that we could control. And the things we could control were build an audience. That felt within our control. We would go and be fun to be around and entertaining and make cool flyers and create an event, try to create a buzz. We could do that.
So what's the band called anyway?
It was called, at the time it was called Robin Black and the Intergalactic Rock Stars. So we could control that. Once we got people coming out, and we would have 200 or 300 people at a show, we started to try to... a small buzz comes around because that doesn't happen that often. Yep. And so record companies would come out and managers would come out. We had different kind of managers be interested, and we turned some of them down too. I remember one guy, I can't remember his name. I know he was managing Joy Drop at the time. And he was talking to us about how to grow things so we could move into other stuff, and we're like, this guy doesn't get it. We're going to be the biggest fucking band in the world. Clearly,
Sputnik.
Yeah, exactly. So, but ultimately, this guy Michael McCarty, who worked with EMI Publishing, he had a reputation for developing bands, and he also sort of came from an era where, this was by now the mid to late 90s. So there were a lot of bands where somebody would write a single and then they'd kind of have a handsome guy or girl and it would be a song, and he wanted to develop acts that might last or mean something to an audience. So they signed us to a very small publishing deal, which was a developmental deal. And publishing isn't like they are your record company, they make your records and market them. They buy from you 25% of all your songwriting royalties for life for a particular number of records. Yeah. In return, we didn't get much of that money. I got a bit of tattoos done. I think I got this done. So we each made $1,200 and then got about, I think, contractually they gave us $25,000 or $30,000 of development fund, which we probably ended up spending $60,000 or $80,000. And we had one guy we did have was a lawyer named Chris Taylor, who now runs E1 entertainment in Canada, and he was a musician and a lawyer, and he said, look, $25,000 is not a lot of money when you have to go and try to build, promote, or create something around your band. He goes, but they always spend more. So we signed that deal. We each made $1,200. 3 of the guys bought guitars. I got tattoos, and I can't remember what the other guy did. I think he bought.
Down in Toronto.
Yeah, Bill Baker.
Okay.
Bill Baker, he's an interesting guy in his own right. He's never had a cell phone. He's never had MySpace. No, he owns Pearl Harbor in the market. And then then we worked with them for a few years, and they introduced us to Garth Richardson, who was the guy who helped make Rage Against the Machine sound like Rage Against the Machine.
Production-wise.
Yeah. They had Rage Against the Machine was this brilliant live band in LA that had made their first record twice and hated it. They hated it. They never put it out. Nobody.
The fucking record label's nightmare.
Yeah. I think the record label liked it and they hated it.
No, that's what I mean. It's a nightmare to have them.
Yeah.
Rage hated it?
Yeah, I think Rage hated it. This is how secondhand how it's got down to me. Rage fucking hated it because their shows were so visceral and alive, and there was a living quality to how the music and they related to it.
Pretty good history in Toronto too. They played here.
Yeah, they have.
In the early days, it was like severe stop.
Yeah, and so they were this live genius back from and they played here, they played all over, and nobody could capture them. And then the approach that people took, it's interesting because this is counterintuitive. The approach that people took was, well, let's record them live. But that never really worked because you're not
like
trying.
Kiss.
Yes, Kiss Alive. Yeah.
Same mentality.
Same mentality.
Which wasn't live.
Wasn't live.
Well, it was live. It was layered like 38 different tracks of it.
Because what I want as a consumer of Kiss or Rage Against the Machine, I want it to feel like when they're live. I don't need it to be live. I want the experience of live. So everybody tried to make it that way. Garth went in and created like sort of a wall of sound. And I don't have full insight, so people that would listen that are production people, please don't hold it against me. But layering and layering and layering and layering to make it massive. The goal was. And it was. It's amazing. Yeah. So he. Then he did that with a band called Kitty. There were a bunch of girls from London, Ontario that were like very heavy. Yeah. And somewhere along the line, I think Michael invited him out and he really liked what we did. And he said, oh yeah, I can. And so we made kind of our approach, and it was always what we liked, was kind of a Cheap Trick, kind of power pop, kind of thick, sugary power pop kind of thing. So we made that with Garth. And it was a very like hazy time because by this point we didn't think we were a big deal, but we thought we were doing what our heroes did, which is now making records with big producers. So, you want to have girls around all the time. You want to take a lot of drugs and stuff like that. Like, I think
You're young still, right?
Yeah, in my 20s still, late 20s, I think. And we still, there was a certain amount of, and one or two of the guys in the band kind of created this certain amount of we were supposed to be a certain way, but so that was really, really exciting. And then for our second record, Garth played it for Bob Ezrin, and Bob Ezrin produced like Pink Floyd, The Wall, and like Kiss Destroyer, and Peter Gabriel, and some of the biggest records in the world. And
was he not on the Dr. Dre?
I don't know.
Is it a different guy? Okay.
No, but he has done hip hop into this decade and stuff. Just like what an absolute genius. And that I think of the entire time and like traveling in Europe and across Canada and making records and stuff, I still think the key experience for me was working with Bob, because Bob was literally a true genius, like a real genius of what he did.
So was it a showdown in the studio, or was it like you sat down like you're being taught?
Yeah, I went to school. Yeah, for sure. Right from the
So you were smart enough just to go, I need to soak this. I need to soak this fuck up.
Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning process too. Like I wasn't learning music, I was learning how to.
That's the thing with art, right? It's the process.
Yeah, and that's it. You watched him do the process. You watched him create or adapt. Yeah. And so I think at that time I saw what it really took to do something. That being the best talker or being the funniest or trying to be charming or being the craziest, none of that was going to matter. Bob Ezrin was as great as genius as he was because he worked harder than everybody else. And
it seems to be a running theme, doesn't it?
Yeah. It really
just work your ass off.
There's no other. You're wasting your time trying to find something. You'll work harder trying to find something other than hard work than you'd work just doing the hard work. And
just do it.
Yeah, which is why you're best off, and it's why things are pretty easy for me now, smooth, like as far as working, is because if you find something that's not work, then you're set. Right? Like, because the key to it is hard work.
You make your job,
Yeah. The key to it is hard work.
When you were in a band, was that hard work?
No.
No, but it wasn't. Mind you,
it
probably
wasn't.
didn't pay what you needed to, but if it did,
Yeah.
it would be the best job in the world.
Yeah. Although realistically,
What about when you were doing hair?
I did really
You worked with
enjoy
Francis
it.
for a bit too, did you?
He was off and on here. Yeah, he was a character. That guy did a lot of acid. Yeah.
That's why I named my production company Dose.
Amazing. Yeah. I just watched a documentary on hallucinogenics last night, and it made me think. I think I gotta take some hallucinogenics within the next 6 months. And
Really?
Like a microdose?
Yeah,
I'm
it's
afraid
something.
to do anything too heavy now.
Mushrooms. Mushrooms is
Mr. Goo will go away.
I do have
The
a
acid,
friend.
no way.
Yeah, no, that would be too much for me. I have a very, very good friend. His name's Erwan Lacour. He is he explores human. He has a company that teaches movement as a fitness and a health and a lifestyle, somewhere between yoga and fighting. It's hard to explain, but he basically has examined what the human body was meant to do: climbing, running, throwing, etc. Yeah, and he trains people based on the real movements of the body, and he has a guy who. A shaman who
Conor McGregor fucking
he
movement
thing.
thing.
Yeah, same world. His is different.
It's like a
but
new age approach.
Yeah.
For lack of a better description.
And what's that? Ayahuasca. He has an ayahuasca shaman out in outside of Albuquerque, about an hour up the mountain from Albuquerque, and he's invited me out a couple of times to take that ceremony.
Would you rather go into the rainforest to do it, or would you? And not have much medical attention nearby.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Or would you rather? But at the same time,
either,
but at the same time, if you do it, say in Albuquerque, New York, and kind of lose your marbles for a bit, you could end up strapped down getting injections.
True.
But if you're in, if you're in the rainforest, you can run.
You'll work it out yourself.
Fight with some monkeys and come back and go. That was dope.
Yeah. Well, Albuquerque, I think we might even be closer to 2 hours outside of Albuquerque, and Erwan has land, and he has done this a lot of times, and the shaman has, and I don't think they would, no matter what was going down, I don't think they would take you to the doctor. They would look at this as your body will work itself out. This is part of the journey. This is part of the journey is psychosomatic or whatever, psychedelic, but it's also physiological. Like your body's going to They think of purging and stuff.
A lot of black bile.
Yeah. So I would definitely do that. I think the idea of changing the perspective strongly, like a psychedelic does, would be something I would do. Sometime in the next year, and I might never do it again. Yeah, exactly. I might never do it again, or I might do it again a year later, or something. When we go to the cottage, I like the chance to try to take mushrooms one night if possible outside.
Is your girl or is it your
wife? Yeah. She would.
That?
Yeah. She's cool with that.
Well, I'd be interested.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
I'll be back in 7 hours.
To come back with covered in pieces of bear claw.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Don't worry. Don't ask me.
I don't think she would go. I don't know for sure. I haven't asked her, but I don't know that she would do the ayahuasca ceremony. But she'd be cool if I was. The approach that I would take, I would have to time it properly with something because he has a busy, complicated life, and he would probably only do that once a year. Is Greg Jackson, who's one of the best coaches in fighting, he has a gym out in Albuquerque. So I'd probably go and study under him for a week or 10 days, do stuff on my and do stuff on my YouTube channel with him and sort of tell the stories from what he's teaching in his gym for my audience, which is good for him.
Do live sessions.
Yeah, exactly, and do stuff like that all week, and then go up into the mountains. Greg Jackson, he's
breakfast with Jackson.
Exactly.
Here I am.
Yeah.
I'm eating some porridge.
Yeah.
Some hearts.
Yeah. Exactly.
Some MC2.
Yeah.
Is Woodley there too, Jackson?
I gotta go. Jackson's coming.
Woodley's down in Florida right now, but Jackson has a lot of them. He's got John Jones. He's got Holly Holm. She's a genius. So I would go and do that. I did that once early on. I was working for a company in Korea who. One of the anchor pieces that I do or have done is I take sort of footage of a fighter fighting and then try to tell some of the secrets behind what they're doing. I used to do it very X's and O's, like, you kick here and he blocks that and then kicks back. But now most people understand that stuff. I could do that for years, but I always want to push the envelope a little further. So I try to connect it to how they're using their body or how they perceive things or the experience of fighting itself. So it's become a little more complicated. But when I did that on a fighter from Korea, Do-Ho Choi, who I've been studying for probably since well before he was ever in the UFC.
Fought on Friday?
Do-Ho Choi, no, he fought in Toronto though. Last year he fought in Toronto.
Right.
And so he, one of the breakdowns I did on him, or a couple of them in fact, somebody in Korea, actually someone from the Philippines who speaks Korea, translated them and just
Korean.
Speaks Korean, translated them. Do you? Yeah. And then they put it up on YouTube, and there's two other interfaces, Dome, and I forget the other one. They're like the YouTube of Korea. And
oh, really?
Yeah, they have a few others. And Russia actually has its own Facebook that's used 100 times more than Facebook. It's called something else.
I wonder if they have free speech there.
In Russia, yeah, it's all. If you've made music and art, your stuff will be there. You'd see it there. It won't take you much searching to find what it's called. But to search in it, you need to use some Russian characters. It's fascinating. You get out into those areas of the world. It's amazing. But so they translated this one thing of mine with this Korean fighter, and it got millions and millions of views. So all of a sudden, I had this big audience in Korea. So when I became a free agent, this company from Korea contacted me and said, "We'd like you to do some stuff for us. We'll bring you to Korea to analyze and do stuff and interview with these Korean fighters, and we'll send you to Albuquerque as well." So they sent me out to Albuquerque to analyze some fighters there. So I now have employers in Russia and Korea and the U.S. and here, and it's really kind of an interesting kind of thing. It's really you make it. There's money for sure to be made. There's definitely money to be made.
Well, hey,
but
and you should get every penny.
Yeah,
you earned it. You didn't just land here.
A big key for me is I never make the choice based on money, because if you do, and you give up some other thing because you really don't know where anything is ever going. We talked about instability. If you see everything as it is what it is, and you get in that river and you flow with it a little bit, that thing you said no to that might have paid you $200 could turn into something really big, artistically really rewarding. Maybe it pays you even more.
Something else.
Yeah. I make the choices based on what's going to make me grow and make cool art. If it costs me money, I'd only explore it if it was something that I knew was worth the value of those things. But if it's a choice between something pays me $3,000 and something pays me $700, but the $700 thing has more growth, I'd go that way, because I would hate to be thinking in terms of, and I'll never think like this. The idea that, well, this money might dry up one day, so I better get it while it's here. I think more in terms with where can this all lead? How much more can I grow, and how much more?
Where you came from, right? You're a bigger picture thinker.
Yeah.
Sorry, you think of the bigger picture.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's the bigger picture, and sometimes it's just the journey.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, like I'm going to Russia Tuesday to commentate the World Wushu Championships, and that job came from a company in Switzerland who I worked for 4 years ago in Russia again. So they do productions in multiple languages for events. So it'd be like, what do you call it when horses jump things? Equestrian. Or they'll do, a chess world championship on TV, and they sometimes do fighting stuff. And so I've worked for them before. I did something called the World Combat Games, which was, in St. Petersburg, Russia. And so the Swiss company hired me.
History.
Yeah, that was amazing. 18 days in St. Petersburg. I commentated for 12 days straight, 20 different martial arts.
Did you find the Amber Room?
Did I find what?
The Amber Room?
No, what's the Amber Room? Am I missing something?
Look it up.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, the Amber Room.
Is
All
that
the
in-
Amber
is-
panels?
is that in...
It's history.
It's right in St. Petersburg.
Yeah, it's in St. Petersburg.
I will look it up for sure. But
Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
doing that forced me to learn 20 different martial arts rule sets, structures. It made me an immensely better commentator, but also led to this job. Then this job pays about as well, let's say, as if I went to Vegas for 6 days to cover Conor McGregor fighting Floyd Mayweather for TSN. This
So,
will make...
did you, on that topic,
Yeah.
because that was kind of like what I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
eventually, leading
Yeah.
up to not as a pinnacle,
Yeah.
but as a lot of interest outside of regular UFC
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So you've got Joe Schmo from the cubicle
Yeah.
down the hall there. He's going to do some Googling or whatever and find out about the McGregor fight, and he pops up on you. Did you notice a surge in people
Yeah.
following, A, on your videos, and B, more so bookings because people wanted to talk about it but didn't know how to talk about it just on like News in America or News in the Morning in Toronto or just in generic, you know what I mean?
It was huge. Things like that you can't prepare for. So when it was announced, I went up on my YouTube channel or put something on Instagram. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. It's time to be interested and really analyze it, right? Yeah. I didn't even cross my mind yet. Now it will, because now I've had an experience of something like this, but it didn't even cross my mind that this would lead to work. So within 24 hours of that,
Yeah,
TSN...
you were on top of it. You're putting videos out every time. Information came out. Anything
You're consistent.
noteworthy.
I was
You're
planning to
consistent.
do that myself, which is what I do. If there's a fight I'm thinking about it, if I'm thinking about it, I want to talk about it. So I was going to do stuff on YouTube myself, no question. But I didn't think that would necessarily lead to sort of employment. So within a day, TSN, who I'd done a lot of work for already, and I love working with them. What you're working with is pros. Really the top people. They don't get to the top of their field so you're working around real talented people.
Fishing guys
yeah.
as well.
A guy with a camera. There was a guy I worked with from Winnipeg who they brought in for a shoot, and he's like, and Robin, when we go to do that, just take 2 steps over here and then 1 to the right, and then just pivot slightly. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is this guy getting me to do? And then when I saw the piece after, I'm like, that's why shit looks that good on TV.
Trust the process.
Yeah, because guys like this know the little detail to add movement that feels so natural. The viewer has no idea it's even happening. Yeah. I didn't know any of that. No one had ever asked me to take 1 step, 2, slightly turn my shoulder, and then put my gaze towards the camera. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy's micromanaging. But you know what? I trust him. He's been doing this for 30 years. Then I see it, and I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah. So you're working with people like that. So they call me and say, hey, do you want to go to Vegas to cover this for 5 days? I'm like, wow, this is the job. Then Dana White gets a hold of me through his head production guy, and they say, Dana wants you to do a breakdown of Conor specifically for ESPN.
It's a smart move on his behalf.
Yeah. Thank you. So then I should fly to Vegas to shoot something for ESPN. And I'm in Montreal shooting something with George St. Pierre. Then I'm in Vegas doing that thing. Then while we're doing that, because the company Bell that owns TSN also has CP24 and whatever news things. So we're shooting stuff all week long. If somebody in Canada watched somebody on TV talk about that fight, it was probably me and my friend Russ Amber, who's the boxing guy. Yeah. It was really crazy.
Russ is very funny,
yeah, Russ is awesome.
Him up, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well,
I'm like, he's going to eat Russ up. Russ is so old school.
He's so great. But it was perfect, too. I'm wearing a silver jacket, and I've got messy hair. Yeah. I'm the new thing, and he's like an old, traditional guy. Yeah. So it made for great, it made for great television. The truth of that one is, that one also really, really showed me that, that to do my job on a level, people loved it. Right? And I got so much great. TSN loved it. The audience loved it. But I also realized it's like I am still hoping to teach something. So talking about ideas that are 2 or 3 layers deep, I have to keep working on figuring out how to bring analogies that can make sense. If I can compare the way you fight to making a nice stew, or if I can compare, when you do this, it's kind of like in football where they run and keep finding analogies and stories and things to make it so that regular people who don't spend their lifetime watching the thing that I'm supposed to be the expert at. And that I got a lot out of it, but people seem to really like it. They were really happy, and that thing. But the frustrating or weird thing is there was so much really going on when you take a guy who doesn't even know how to box by the standards of what a high-level professional boxer is, and you put him in a position, or he puts himself in a position where he has to beat the best in the world at something. That right there we never see in almost anything. You never go and you get somebody who is a 25-year-old entrepreneur and put him up against the guy who owns the Cleveland
the old puck.
What's his name?
Cleveland Browns?
No, that guy in Shark Tank.
Dallas.
Yeah, that guy.
Okay,
Mark Cuban. And you take some 22-year-old kid who is a web entrepreneur, and you put them in this, you never see that. That idea that what you're taking, or, somebody, I'm looking for the perfect analogy, a chef who's been doing it for 40 years against some kid who's a creative home cook who thinks differently, and
that's a good analogy, because boxing is all about nuances, right?
It's also developed people. The very thing that when we got into the discussion, people would be like, as if you're gonna, because my take and his take and his coach's take. So this is not a theory. This is what they told me. They said we can't. The coach said, we can't go out and box the best boxer in the world. The only thing we can do is try to find some way around it. Is there a flaw in the system? Is there a bug somewhere in the machine that is boxing itself? My answer to that is, of course there is. There was tons of them, because if we looked to 2050, boxing would look different. Yeah. When we go and we watch old boxing, with those guys with the mustaches and they hold their hands way far out in front of them, we go, look how silly they were. Amazing posters and amazing fights back then. Yeah. And we look back, we go, see these silly guys, they thought that was fully formed. Now in 2017, it's fully formed. It's like, you have to be crazy to think that in 2047 it won't be. Why? Because there's things still to be learned. And if there's things still to be learned, there's flaws in the system. The only possible way a guy who doesn't know how to do it on that level can do it. And that's what the coach said, 100%, that's what we were trying to do. So people would say, I called it a disruption, which is what in Silicon Valley, when you go and create a new app, or you find a new way to do something, to take something that's been done, or my smartphone. This is not the same thing as a flip phone or a rotary phone. You find a different way, right? And that is logically what you do, and that's what his coach told me. And not only that, that's what every coach tells me. Their whole game right now is finding the beliefs that people have about the structures of the world they work in, whether that is Silicon Valley or you're working in fighting or whatever. And that's the world we live in. People are looking for the crack in the system. But to some people, they'd be like, you can't do it. It's been around for 100 years. But modern thinkers are like, the reason we can do it is because it's been around for 100 years. Because the system believes it's perfect now. And it's not perfect. It can't be perfect because nothing's ever perfect.
Society's starting to eat its own tail.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming down.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that Floyd was the right person to put up against that, because his strategy, when you really break it down, you watch the fight over, I'm like, holy shit, he flipped it 3 times on Connor.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly what he was doing round for round for round. It's the old rope-a-dope that nobody ever looked at. It's an old school way of thinking it. But that's what it was. It was rope-a-dope, man.
It was the right strategy. So the only, let's say it's you and I, the only way I can beat you is I have to give you something that you don't expect, and I have to knock you out in the first couple of rounds. If I don't, you're going to learn, because you spend a lifetime of learning in real time. You're going to learn whatever little seam or crease I found in your in the way you express fighting, you're going to close that within a couple of rounds. And what's your best way to do it? Be defensively, like 95% of my mental resources to protecting myself until I got that figured out. Yeah. That one big punch that Conor McGregor landed, if that knocked him out, the whole world is different. But really nothing is different. Exactly what we saw would be the same dynamic. Yeah. Whether that punch knocked him out or that punch didn't knock him out, what we saw was exactly what we were going to see. But
Conor went out there and he convinced the world.
Yeah.
And he sold it to the world. He did it. He fought, and he walked away, cashed out.
And his
a better
people,
person for it, all across the board.
Big time. And his
a lot of people wouldn't be better
all the way around.
The other thing is he's looking for why and how he can fail to find ways to go to get better, to improve.
Have you had a conversation with him?
Yeah, lots. Yeah, lots more with his coach.
Right.
But but there's a few interviews with me and Conor on the internet, and he very much respects my work, as I've been told by him and his coach and his agent and stuff, because I've analyzed him on a deeper level than anyone on planet Earth.
And he's like, this guy gets me.
Yeah. I mean, I know what he's doing. I know what he's trying to do, and I know how he thinks and why he takes these risks. But something can be right under your nose, and people will still deny it. I mean, the fact that the fight happened itself is the ultimate example of that type of disruptive thinking. You know how you get a chance to fight Floyd Mayweather for $80 million? The way you do it is start boxing when you're 12, box until you're 35 and get to 35-0 and have the best agent and have the best manager. That's how you do it. You don't just start talking when you don't even box. That's not how you do it. Oh, wait a second. That's how he did it.
That's exactly
how he did it. So he did it because he did all the things. I mean, the fucking president of the United States is the president of the United States because he didn't buy the belief system that you can't say grab her by the pussy. Yeah. You can't be a fucking white supremacist. You know, and I would take heat. I mean, I would take heat probably.
Well, he hasn't come out and said it.
He hasn't come out and said it, but his behavior, I mean.
And we all interpret things differently. Let's not go political on
No, let's not go political.
I fully agree with everything you're saying.
Let's not go fully political on something.
The reason why I say
would
that.
he be a white supremacist?
Hold on.
If you think about it, we can go deeper.
Well, the reason why. Hold on a sec. Is why I don't think we should go into this. Is that I'm fucking exhausted of it. Everybody else is exhausted of it. And this is about Robin, not about rehashing bullshit that's been fed down our throats.
I hear you 100%. But here's one other reason that I think that's so. Not that thing, but why I think that there's a wise choice in avoiding the conversation. Not because I don't want to offend anybody. I fucking don't care who I offend. I mean, that's part of life. We're going to offend each other all the time. But it's like the argument itself is the problem. The argument itself, because when we argue with somebody, two people are arguing with each other, and they're both so certain that they're right. And the reason they're so certain that they're right is because they only listen to podcasts that have their thought, and they only watch the news. That echo chamber.
I don't want to talk
and I know, and I'm with you.
Not to hear your opinion. If I'm listening, I've already heard it and made my mind up.
Yeah, it's true.
The common person would not want to listen to why that 10% of a punch could land on his chin. Well, you could land that punch on my chin and knock me out, and if you're like 110 pounds, like there's a possibility that punch could land on Floyd Mayweather at 40 years of age, but they didn't want to hear it. He's not going to land one punch. It
still exists.
He's a pro fighter, man. Like, he's going to land a punch.
The chance still exists, though.
This is the same echo chamber, exactly the same one, and it creates exactly the same weird passion. And when I love fighting, so I love people who are passionate about it, but there's also this weird thing. It's like once, and this goes right back to what we were talking about. You can do it in politics. You can do it with Beyonce. You can do it in fighting. You can do it with exactly. You can do it with almost anything. Once you've decided that Conor's the guy, or you've decided that Floyd's the guy, or in whatever way, everything you will look for will only be there to prove your thing, and when something disproves it, you'll just attack that thing. And it's very, very strange.
Well, we saw it the night of watching the fight.
The truth is,
people were convicted completely to argumentative points in a bar.
Big time. I mean, I watched that man have to protect himself because it's the right thing to do, because this is a guy doing things in a different way. The punches that hit him, Floyd, they said, hey, what was going on? He goes, man, he hit me from different angles. Now, what were those different angles? Why are they different? They're different because what you believe in boxing, you believe those angles are wrong, and so do your training partners, and so does everyone you've ever trained with. They're and I'm using air quotes. They're wrong because the doctrines of how we've learned it have taught us that they're wrong. Therefore, they're irrelevant because they never happen. But in the end, this guy did them. So the best boxer in the world doesn't get hit by, quote, weird angles. They're just, that is the difference. So to do that, he then covered up because that was the right thing to do to win that fight. That's what happened. One guy was dangerous for 3 to 5 rounds. The other expert was like, I better protect myself and really pay attention to it. And even when assigning all of his defenses, still got rocked by an uppercut. That actually happened. But to other people, I talked to people after, minutes after. One guy was like, I've been studying boxing for 3 years. I'm like, 3 years? You don't say. Wow. Right? And he, I know, exactly. Robinson, yeah, exactly. So, and this guy said to me, I said, well, what did you learn? And he goes, well, I learned that Floyd fights down to the level of his opponent. And I'm like, you just found the only perspective that could prevent you from learning nothing. Yeah. You know, you cannot learn anything if you just arbitrarily make an explanation. If instead Floyd, if he was still fighting, would go back and go, how the fuck did that guy hit me? Holy shit, that was... And he'd learn something. He would learn something. But the audience wants to not learn anything. They just want to be combative about it. And it's a very strange thing. The truth is, whether Conor knocked him out with that one punch or Floyd tired him out and knocked him out in the 10th round, the truth is the truth is the truth. The dynamic of that fight is like, we don't even need the result to say what's there. We can say what's there by seeing it. The outcome, the consequences, the result have no bearing on the fight itself. The dynamic of the fight itself is what it is, regardless of who wins.
And that was,
and it always
he can't hold his own with him, and he's not going to be able to hit him once, and he won't win one round. Boom, 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 check. And the fight's not over, and he's won that. He won that battle, right?
Yeah, and...
Hey guys, listen, I gotta go. I got a game.
Okay, I got one question for you.
No, you guys keep going.
No, we're going to wrap this up here. It's an hour and a half for it's not good for you.
It's great.
So, you know, in those weekly TV shows, they're like weekly magazines where they got someone coming in, they talk to them, and they go out and walk through the trees in the woods and talk about when you were a kid, where did you grow up, or whatever. So let's paint the picture. We got you growing up in
Pinawa, Manitoba.
Simpsons TV show. You're surrounded by geniuses. You decide that I love doing martial arts. Your parents drive for 6 hours a day to make sure you can, 3 times a week. You weren't hard done by growing up.
No.
Clearly.
No.
Which was amazing. It helped prepare you. You moved to the Big Smoke, which is Peggerville. Winnipeg. You hang out with Snip and Dipper, Chip and Pepper. You do blow with Kelsey Sack. Kelsey, you get on a plane. You say goodbye to your buddies. You come to Toronto, and you hold meetings with high record executives, telling them that you have a band in a demo, which you don't have.
Which I don't have.
You faked it until you can make it. And you decide one day, I'm just going to do, I don't know, UFC commentary. And you start doing that. You get a huge following. Most importantly, respect. You're touching down on, you were on Joe's podcast.
A couple times.
What's his fighter and the kid?
Alwani too? Did you
no, I don't think I've done aerials ever.
Point in case, you're making waves. Not just waves, but you're on TV as well. Everything you wanted to do, you're kind of like skipping across a pond. You're hitting all the right spots, right?
The right time too.
You're not drowning anywhere. So where's the next spot you land? Like where 10 years from now, where does it end up?
I think
Can you calculate 10 years? I don't know if you can.
I don't know now because I see the world changes so much faster. It either is changing faster, which I do believe, or I understand it more that it is. So I don't think I can see that far ahead. But now I think I'm so stuck on the idea of just getting better, like getting smarter. It isn't about and it's not about the job anymore or what I accomplish. It's about what I learn. Because if I learn, I know that I'm on the very front end of studying something that I love. Once you're on the very front end of it, how much more can I learn? What breakthroughs could I get? What plateaus can I get? In my learning that I can break through and understand it on another level. And then the next job will be to be able to use language to explain it in a way that's of value to people. Now I feel like if I didn't add a single follower or I didn't get another new job, but, I was able to learn more and share more ideas, I'll be happy. I don't think I need to
So do you think you want, like, this is not an ask kiss thing.
Yeah.
It's what I was trying to paint out there is that you just went out there and did whatever you wanted to do. It's not like you just went out there and did whatever you wanted to do and lived a life. You had impact on people.
Yeah.
And you made waves along the way. You know, some people meeting and knowing famous people is a big, like, it's, especially in today's culture, that's their job. Their goal in life is to meet this person or whatever. You touched, you know, even fashion designers that changed the landscape. Chip and Pepper. Buddy from Cheers. I told you, I'm gapping out here. I'm getting tired.
Legendary.
What I'm saying is, when you go out and do things, you do them right. You know, from you're hanging out with one of the legendary record producers.
Yeah.
So, what I'm trying to paint here is that there is something next, and where you're going, you can't say you know for sure what it is.
Yeah.
But is it?
But
Are
I
you going
think
to write a book? Are you going to? That's where I'm saying not kissing ass here. I'm saying, what are you going to do? Write a book? Talk about how?
Well, actually, I'm writing a live show, a live stand-up show where I'll storytell, kind of whether it's got a TED Talk feel with a bit of comedy, with a little bit of sort of breaking down things. And then the last hour is sort of a Q&A, like my podcast. It's called Ask Robin Black Live. And the first one I'm doing is December 17th at the Park Theater in Winnipeg. So I'm in the writing phase. Back home. Yeah, so December 6th.
And you're doing one in Toronto as well, though.
I will probably in the spring. I don't have. I booked it in Winnipeg because December 16th is the UFC, so there was a logical time to do it. And I figured if I booked a date, I'd have to write the show.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when I booked the date, I had exactly Hello Winnipeg. That's what I had. And now I have a 5-act show, and I have the first 2 acts sketched with my friend Graham Isidore. We're sketching them.
That's what I was going to say. Who's helping you produce
Yeah,
this?
a guy named Graham Isidore. He writes for Vice. He's written stuff. He's interviewed me for Vice, and he runs a storytelling night, and I've done storytelling at his event in Toronto. It's about once a month.
So again, it's the craft, right?
Yeah, and
the process is which only helps you in your long run.
Standing in front of a crowd of people, I'm going to tell stories about being in a band and fighting in a cage and the lessons that I've learned from them. Standing in front of people, I feel I'm going to be comfortable, but it's been years since I've done it. But I'm not going up there unless I'm I'm going up there.
So you're going to be.
I'm going to be fully prepared.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to be fully prepared.
So if I see you walking around the neighborhood talking to yourself,
that's what it's going to be doing.
So guys, if you see him out and about, just don't fuck with them. Fuck with them, but just don't fuck them up.
Yeah.
So listen, what are your social media handles? We'll get you out of here. And you as well.
I'm going back to work on this Russia stuff to get ready.
So
Instagram.
Everybody in America.
Yeah.
That was my comedy.
You can't go politics.
No politics.
So you're working on the Russian
Instagram is Robin Black MMA. On Twitter and Periscope, it's Robin Black MMA. And on Facebook, I think it's The Robin Black. And my YouTube is youtube.com/Robin Black. And if people subscribe there, I'm doing something almost every day. And then, I'm doing the Wushu World Championships in Russia next week. I'm going to probably do a lot of...
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Yeah. It's going to be
You're going to be able to find so many vintage rock shirts and stuff when you're there, too.
Man. Yeah. I have a 9-hour layover.
Rabinski's from there?
Yeah, it's going to be killer. I have a 9-hour layover in Istanbul, Turkey on the way back. So I'm going to leave the airport and go explore that a little bit. It's going to be cool. And then when I get back, right back into... TSN, we're doing stuff for George St. Pierre versus Michael Bisping. I'm going to do a couple things for them, and then I go to New York for that and cover it for TSN, just like we did with McGregor versus Mayweather. So that one has turned out to be just I thought maybe I wasn't doing television much anymore, and then here I am doing the biggest sports show. Yeah, it is. TSN will be around for a long time still. TV is shrinking, but it does. The things that are anchored are live sports, and this is the biggest sports channel in Canada, and I get to talk about fighting on it. So that has turned out to be an unexpected, amazing thing. That one. Yeah.
Dope. Will you come back?
Yes, please.
We can talk fight. We didn't really get too much fight talk.
So
we want everybody to get to know you.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Really
Thanks. It's good hanging out. Maybe like the third week of December. Or October, third week of October, because the fourth week we go to, maybe we'll talk about George. I spent weeks and weeks with George St. Pierre. I learned so much about how he thinks and why he is the way he is. So I can share that with you guys.
And some stories about
third week of
aliens
October.
as well.
Yeah, he's got some crazy
I know,
stuff.
I'm totally interested.
Yeah. I'll tell you about Russia too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Wicked.
Awesome. This
All right, well,
is
thanks.
a city. This is Chad Cranston speaking here.
Steve Mealing, thanks once again for tuning into the City Podcast. Chad will give you our social media deets.
Yeah, it's the City Podcast. Search it up on Facebook, on Instagram at the City Podcast. Our emails, whatever have you, don't email us, just DM us. No dick pics, please. We don't want them. And if you're on Twitter, at the City Podcast as well too.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
We're out of here, man. Thank you.